My name is Adaeze Okonkwo, and I need you to listen to every single word I am about to say. Because what I am going to tell you today is the kind of story that will make you rethink everyone you have ever been kind to. I paid for this girl's school fees for 6 years. 6 years. As she thanked me by sleeping with my husband. But let me take you back to the very beginning, because if I just tell you the ending, you will not understand the kind of pain that comes with this story. This is not just a story about betrayal. This is a story about a woman who opened her home, her heart, and her purse to someone who had nothing, and watched that same person dismantle everything she had built. Her name was Ngozi Eze. She was 17 years old the first time I saw her, sitting outside my gate in the rain, soaking wet, her school bag pressed against her chest like it was the only thing she owned. I was coming back from the market that evening. The Okada man dropped me at my junction, and there she was. Thin as a reed, eyes sunken. But even in that state, there was something about the way she sat, spine straight, chin up, that made me stop and look twice. I asked her what she was doing outside someone's gate in the rain. She told me she had come to find my neighbor, Mrs. Balogun, who had promised to help her with accommodation, but Mrs. Balogun had traveled. She did not know anyone else in Lagos. She had come from Abia State. Her father had died the previous year, and her mother was a petty trader who could barely feed the younger ones. Ngozi had just gotten admission into a federal polytechnic in Lagos, and she had come to the city with exactly 3,000 naira in her pocket, Mrs. Balogun's address written on a piece of paper, and dreams that were too big for her current situation. I am not going to pretend that I am a saint. I am a Lagos woman. I have heard every kind of story under this sun. But something about that girl that evening made my chest tighten. Maybe it was the way she was holding that school bag. Maybe it was because I have a daughter of my own, and I kept thinking, what if this were Chidinma? What would I want someone to do for her? I brought her inside. My husband Emeka was watching a football match when I walked in with this drenched girl. He looked at me the way husbands look at their wives when they already know they are about to say something that cannot be undone. He said, "Adaeze, who is this?" I said, "Her name is Ngozi. She needs somewhere to sleep tonight." That one night became 6 years. We gave Ngozi a room in our boys' quarters. We fed her, clothed her, paid her school fees every semester without fail. When the polytechnic fees went up, Emeka grumbled, but he paid. When she needed textbooks, I bought them. When she needed transport money, I gave it without counting. When she was sick and needed hospital treatment during her first year, I was the one who sat with her through the night at Lagos Island General Hospital, while my own husband was sleeping in my bed at home. I am telling you these things not so you can clap for me. I am telling you so you understand what I gave to this girl. And she was not ungrateful. That is what makes this story so painful. Ngozi was not some cold, scheming child from the beginning. She washed plates in this house. She swept my compound before I woke up some mornings. She helped my daughter Chidinma with her homework. On Sundays, she would wake up and start cooking before I came back from church. She called me Aunty Adaeze with such warmth that sometimes my own sisters who visited would mistake her for a relative. She even called Emeka Uncle Emeka. She will say, "Uncle Emeka, good morning, sir," with such respect that the man would beam. Emeka liked her. He said she reminded him of his younger sisters back in the village. He said she had good home training. He said we had done a good thing bringing her in. That was Emeka talking in year 1. I want to tell you about the Ngozi of year 3. Because that is when things began to shift. And I was too busy living my life to notice the signs that were right in front of me. By her 3rd year in the polytechnic, Ngozi had changed. Not in a bad way, at least not what I could see. She had grown into herself. The thin, drenched girl was now a young woman, sharp-featured, with the kind of confidence that comes from education and stability. She had friends now, girls from school who would come to visit on weekends. She had started doing her hair, wearing nice clothes, the ones I bought her, but also the ones her friends introduced her to. She was beautiful. I noticed this. I was not blind. I should tell you about my marriage at this point, because a story about a wife whose husband betrayed her cannot be told without telling you about the marriage itself. Emeka and I had been married for 11 years by the time Ngozi came to live with us. We had 2 children, Chidima and Tobechukwu. We had a house in Surulere that we were still paying off. Emeka was an engineer at a construction firm and I ran a fabric shop in Balogun Market. We were not rich. We were comfortable. We had the kind of marriage where you know your partner is not perfect, but you also know they are yours, and that is enough. But marriages go through seasons. Emeka and I had been in a cold season for about a year before everything fell apart. We were not fighting. We were just distant. He was stressed about a project at work. I was stressed about the shop. We were both tired. We were co-parents more than we were lovers. Some evenings we would sit in the same room and barely speak. I thought it was just a phase. I thought we would come back to each other. I thought this was what long marriages looked like, and we just needed to push through. I was wrong about several things that year. It was my friend Yetunde who first said something.
Yetunde is the kind of friend who talks too much, but is usually right about the things that matter. She came to visit one Saturday afternoon, and Ngozi was in the living room watching a movie with Emeka while I was in the kitchen cooking. Yetunde walked into the kitchen, closed the door behind her, and said to me in Yoruba, "She is using Igbo, but I understood," she said. "Your housemate and your husband are very comfortable with each other, oh." I told her she was imagining things. I said they have lived in the same house for 3 years. Of course they are comfortable. She looked at me for a long moment and then she said, "Adaeze, I am not talking about comfort. I am talking about the way a woman laughs for a man when she wants something from him." I told Yetunde to mind her business. I want to sit here and tell you that I am a wise woman, that I went home that evening and paid attention, that I caught it early. But I did not. I went back to my cooking and I served the food and we all ate together and I watched Ngozi and Emeka and saw nothing that made me afraid. Ngozi was still calling him Uncle Emeka. Emeka was still talking to her about her coursework. Everything looked exactly the way it had always looked. It was Chidima who broke the silence, and she was only 12 years old. My daughter came to me one evening in December, the year Ngozi was finishing her HND program. Chidima came to me while I was in my room, going through account books for the shop. She sat on the edge of the bed and she said, "Mommy, I want to tell you something, but you must not beat me." I looked at my daughter. She had that face children make when they are carrying something too heavy for their age. I put down the account books. I said, "Chidinma, what happened?" She said, "I saw Daddy kissing Aunty Ngozi in the kitchen." The room did not spin. That is what people say happens when they receive terrible news. The room did not spin. What happened was that everything went very, very still. The sounds from the television in the living room became suddenly distant. My own breathing became loud in my ears. I looked at my daughter and I asked her, very slowly, "When did you see this?" She said it was 2 weeks ago, that she had woken up in the night to get water and she had seen them in the kitchen. She had not said anything because she was afraid. She had been carrying this for 2 weeks, my 12-year-old child, because she did not know what her mother would do with this information. I held my daughter. I held her for a long time. And then I told her she had done the right thing by telling me. And I told her to go to her room and sleep, and that I would handle it. I sat alone in that room for 3 hours. I am going to tell you what I did not do, because I think it matters. I did not cry. I did not scream. I did not go to the kitchen and confront Emeka that night. I did not throw things. I did not call my mother. I did not call Yetunde. I did not do any of the things a woman in a Nollywood film does when she finds out her husband has been betraying her. I sat there, and I thought about 6 years. 6 years of school fees. 6 years of feeding someone, housing someone, treating someone like blood when she had none of my blood in her veins. 6 years of watching this girl grow from a frightened, drenched 17-year-old into a woman. 6 years of Aunty Adaeze. 6 years of kneeling to greet me. 6 years of Sunday cooking and early morning sweeping, and yes, ma, and thank you, ma. And in the middle of all that gratitude, in the middle of all that performed devotion, she had found a way to reach into my chest and pull out everything that kept me whole. I want you to understand something. When a stranger betrays you, it hurts. When a friend betrays you, it cuts deeper. But when someone you rescued from the rain betrays you, someone you looked at and said, "You matter. You are worth saving." Someone whose future you funded with your own hands, when that person looks you in the eye every day and calls you auntie while dismantling your home behind your back, that is not just betrayal. That is a particular kind of evil that does not have a clean word in any language. The next morning, I woke up before everyone else. I made breakfast, I set the table, and when Emeka came downstairs, I told him to sit down because I needed to talk to him. He sat. He probably thought it was about the shop, or about Tobechuku's school fees, or about something ordinary and manageable. The look on his face when I said my daughter saw you kissing Ngozi in the kitchen 2 weeks ago, that look, I will carry it with me for the rest of my life. He did not deny it immediately. That was the thing. He sat there for almost 10 full seconds. And in those 10 seconds, I understood that the story was worse than a single kitchen kiss. I saw it in the way he looked at his hands. I saw it in the way his jaw moved without producing words. I saw it in the way he finally looked up at me, and the first thing out of his mouth was not, "It is not true," or "Your daughter misunderstood," or "Adaeze, I swear to God." The first thing out of his mouth was, "Adaeze, let me explain." When someone says, "Let me explain," there is nothing to explain. An explanation is for accidents. An explanation is for misunderstandings. What Emeka needed was not an explanation. What Emeka needed was a miracle. He told me it had been going on for 4 months. 4 months. He said it started after a party they had both attended, a farewell gathering for one of his colleagues, where Ngozi had come along because I had been unable to go due to a trade fair in Aba. He said they had too much to drink. He said it just happened. I want to stop here and address this thing that men say. It just happened. As if the human body is a car without a steering wheel. As if 4 months of a sustained affair is something that happens to a person the way rain happens, without choice, without intention, without a single deliberate decision made on a single deliberate day. I looked at my husband, this man I had built a life with, and I asked him one question. I said, "Did you think about me even once?" He started to cry, and I felt nothing. I went upstairs. I knocked on the door of the boys' quarters. Ngozi opened it, and I could see from her eyes that Emeka had sent her a message because she already knew. Her eyes were red. She had been crying. She was wearing a wrapper around her chest, and she looked, in that moment, very young. She looked 17 again, and for one terrible second I almost felt sorry for her. Then I remembered my daughter sitting on the edge of my bed with a secret that had been rotting inside her for 2 weeks, and the pity evaporated.
I said to Ngozi, I want you out of my house by this afternoon. Take everything you came with and everything I gave you and leave. You are not to contact my husband, my children, or me. Not today, not next month, not ever. Do you understand? She started to talk. She started to say, Aunty, please. Aunty, let me explain. Aunty, I am sorry. Aunty, it was a mistake. Aunty, I love this family. She was kneeling on the floor of that room, the same room I had furnished for her, kneeling on the rug I had bought for her, and she was begging me with tears running down her face. I stood at the door and I waited for her to finish. When she was done talking, I said, I heard you. Now pack your things. I did not slam the door. I did not call her names. I did not throw her clothes into the compound the way they do in films. I walked back to my room. I sat on my bed and I called Yetunde. Yetunde said only one thing. She said, I told you. She was right. She had told me. But even if she had told me 100 times, I do not think I would have been ready for the way it actually felt. Nobody is ever ready for the weight of a betrayal they funded with their own hands. Ngozi left that afternoon. She packed 2 bags and a traveling box.
Emeka had locked himself in the desk room. My children were at school. I sat in the living room and watched her wheel her box through my front door. And just before she reached the gate, she stopped and turned around. She said, Aunty, I am sorry, truly. I said nothing. She left. Now let me tell you what happens after, because people always want to know what happens after. They want to know if the marriage survived. They want to know if I took Emeka back. They want to know if Ngozi ever paid for what she did. They want to know if there is a resolution that makes sense, something clean and satisfying they can carry away from this story. The truth is messier than that. Emeka and I did not immediately separate. We lived in that house together for 4 more months, in a silence so thick you could touch it. He slept in the guest room. I slept in our room. The children moved between us like little diplomats, careful with their words, watching our faces for signals. It broke my heart to watch them do that. Children should not have to be careful in their own home. During those 4 months, Emeka did everything a man who wants forgiveness does. He stopped going out on evenings. He came home early. He helped with the children. He did not touch his phone in front of me. He asked, regularly, quietly, if we could talk. And I said, not yet, again and again, because I was not ready. And also because I genuinely did not know what I wanted. I went to see Pastor Effiong at our church, not because I am a deeply religious woman, but because I needed to speak to someone outside my situation who would not immediately take a side. Pastor Effiong listened to everything, and then he said something I have thought about many times since. He said, Adaeze, forgiveness is not the same as reconciliation. You can choose to forgive without choosing to stay. And you can choose to stay without pretending nothing happened. The two decisions are separate, and only you can make them. I thought about that for a long time. Let me tell you about the moment I made my decision about Emeka. It was a Tuesday evening in April, about 3 months after Ngozi left. I had come home late from the shop. The house was quiet. Chidima and Tobechukwu were asleep. I went to the kitchen to heat some food, and Emeka was already there. He was washing dishes. He did not know I was watching him. He was standing at the sink, washing plates in the quiet of the night, and he had this expression on his face that I recognized from the early years of our marriage. It was the expression of a man who knows he has made an enormous mistake and is trying to figure out how to carry it. I thought about 11 years. I thought about the shop we built together, the house we were still paying off, the children we had raised, the lean years and the better years, the illnesses we had nursed each other through, the funerals we had attended holding hands. I thought about all the versions of Emeka I had known, The young man who came to my father's house in a borrowed suit to ask for my hand. The man who cried in the car on the way home the day Chidinma was born. The man who once drove an hour in the middle of the night to bring me paracetamol because I had called him crying with a headache and he could not bear to hear me in pain. And then I thought about 4 months of deliberate deception, about a girl we had both raised, about my daughter carrying a secret that aged her. The two things lived side by side in me that night, and they did not cancel each other out. That is the complicated truth. The love and the damage existed at the same time, with equal weight. I walked into the kitchen. Emeka turned around and saw me. We looked at each other for a long time. I said, Emeka, we will go for counseling, both of us, together, every week, for as long as it takes. And if at the end of it I decide to leave, you will let me leave without drama. And if I decide to stay, you will spend the rest of this marriage making sure I never regret it. Those are my terms. He said, okay. That was not a happy ending. That was a beginning of something very difficult. We went for counseling for 7 months. We said things in that small office that we had never said in 11 years of marriage. Things that had nothing to do with Ngozi. Things that had been sitting at the bottom of us for years. The counselor, a calm woman named Dr. Abara, said that affairs rarely happen in a vacuum, that there is always context, always a gap somewhere that someone chose to fill in the wrong way. I did not want to hear that at first. I wanted to hear that my husband was simply a bad man, and Ngozi was simply a bad woman, and I was simply an innocent victim. But victimhood alone does not help you heal. And I wanted to heal. We are still together, Emeka and I. I will not tell you that everything is perfect, because that would be a lie, and you deserve the truth. There are days when I look at him, and the wound is fresh again, like it happened yesterday. There are days when something small, a song, a smell, the way someone laughs in a certain key, brings it all back, and I have to go into the bathroom and sit with it by myself for a few minutes. He knows that this is part of what he broke, and he carries that knowing. But there are also days when I think about where we were and where we are now, and I see that the counseling, the hard conversations, the choice we both made to try, has done something to us. Not healed us the way people mean when they say healing, as if you can be returned to your original state. But something different. A kind of depth that comes only from surviving something that should have destroyed you. Now let me tell you about Ngozi, because this story cannot end without telling you what happened to her. 3 months after she left my house, I got a call from a number I did not recognize. I almost did not pick it. The voice on the other end was Mrs. Balogu, my neighbor who had originally connected me to Ngozi, the woman Ngozi had come to Lagos to find all those years ago. Mrs. Balogu told me that Ngozi had come to her, that she was in a bad situation. She had nowhere to go. The friends she thought she had in Lagos had scattered. She was sleeping in a face me I face you room in Mushin, with 4 other girls, working in a fast food shop to survive. I sat with this information for 3 days. On the 4th day, I called Mrs. Balogun back. I asked her to give Ngozi a message. I said, "Tell her I heard. Tell her I do not wish her harm, but I will not be the one to rescue her again. She has to build her own life now, and that is not cruelty, it is consequence." Mrs. Balogun was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "I will tell her." I have not heard from Ngozi since. I do not know where she is today. Part of me, the part that is still the woman who saw a girl sitting in the rain outside a gate, that part still wonders sometimes if she is okay. I do not apologize for that part. It is the part of me that made me who I am. But there is another part of me now, a part that knows better. I want to tell you what I have learned from this, and I want to be careful about how I say it, because I do not want it to come out as bitterness. I have worked very hard not to become bitter. Bitterness is a poison you take hoping it will kill the person who wronged you, and it never works that way.
The first thing I learned is this: generosity is a gift, not a guarantee. When you give to someone, you are not buying their loyalty. You cannot buy loyalty. Loyalty is either in a person's character or it is not. And no amount of school fees will install it in someone who does not already have it. I gave to Ngozi because I had the capacity to give, and she had a need. I should not have expected that the giving would inoculate my home against her capacity to do harm. Kindness does not protect you from people. It only tells you who you are.
The second thing I learned is about vigilance. Not paranoia, not suspicion of everyone around you, but the kind of watchfulness that comes from respecting yourself enough to pay attention to what is happening inside your own house. Yetunde told me. My daughter told me. Before that, there were smaller things. A look too long held. A laugh slightly too intimate. And I chose not to see them because seeing them would have required me to do something difficult. We do this to ourselves. We look away from the things that are painful to look at, and we call it peace. But it is not peace. It is just avoidance wearing peace's clothes. The third thing I learned is about my marriage, and this is the hardest one to say. Emeka made a choice that I cannot make sense of, and I do not pretend to. But I also know that in those years before Ngozi, I had let my marriage go cold without fighting for it. I do not say this to excuse what he did. What he did is inexcusable. But healing required me to look honestly at all of it, including my own part in the distance that grew between us. The counseling helped me see that. Dr. Abara was not gentle about it, and I am grateful for that, because gentle would not have been useful. The fourth thing, and I say this directly to every woman watching me right now who has a generous heart. Be careful who you bring into your home. Not every person in the rain deserves your gate. This is not wickedness. This is wisdom. You can have compassion for people's struggles without making yourself vulnerable to their choices. You can help someone from a safe distance. You can give without giving access to everything you have built. Know the difference. There is something else I want to say, and it is specifically for the Ngozis of this world. For every person who has been lifted by someone's kindness and decided that the best way to say thank you is to reach into that person's life and take what is not theirs. I want you to hear me clearly. The person who helped you is not just a resource. They are a human being with a heart that can break, with children who can be hurt, with a marriage that can crack under the weight of what you do in secret. When you choose to betray the hand that fed you, you are not just making a personal decision about your own life. You are detonating a bomb in the middle of someone else's world, and the aftermath lasts longer than the explosion. I am still in my house in Surulere. The school fees are paid in full now, for my own children. My fabric shop is doing well. Chidinma is 15 and sharp as a tack, and she has not spoken Ngozi's name in 3 years. Tobechuku barely remembers her. Emeka is sitting in this marriage with both hands, the way he should have always done. I am not the same woman who stood at a gate in the rain and felt her chest tighten at the sight of a girl with a school bag. I do not know whether I am better or worse than that woman. I think I am just different. I have replaced some of the openness with discernment, and I have had to grieve the innocence of that original openness, because once you have been taught a lesson the hard way, you cannot unlearn it. You can only carry it forward. Some people will watch this and say I was foolish. They will say I should have known better. They will say a woman with sense does not bring a young girl into her home and expect nothing to go wrong. To those people, I say this. The fact that harm is possible does not mean goodness is wrong. If we only ever acted in the ways that guaranteed our safety, we would never reach outside ourselves at all. I reached outside myself. I paid a price I did not expect. And I am still here. I am still standing. I have not let this story make me someone who cannot love, because that would mean the betrayal won twice. Once when it happened, and once when it finished me. I refused to be finished. I paid for that girl's school fees for 6 years. I sat with her in the hospital when she was sick. I watched her graduate. I watched her walk across that stage in a gown I had bought for her. And I clapped for her with my own 2 hands. The same hands she would later spit on. I am not telling you this for pity. I have no need of pity. I am telling you this because somewhere out there is a woman who is sitting in her living room right now, feeling the first cold draft of something she is not ready to name. There is a woman who is listening to something Yetunde is saying and choosing not to hear it. There is a woman who has been more mother to someone else's dream than guardian of her own home. I want that woman to hear me. Pay attention. Not with fear, but with love for yourself. Pay attention to your house, to your children, to your marriage, to the small signs that appear before the large catastrophes. You deserve to live in a home that is safe, and that safety begins with you refusing to look away from the things that are difficult to see. I am Adaeze Okonkwo. I paid 6 years of school fees for a girl who slept with my husband. I found out through my 12-year-old daughter. I confronted them both. I sent the girl away. I chose, after everything, to fight for my marriage, not because the betrayal was small, but because the life I had built was worth fighting for. And I chose, equally, never again to extend myself so far for someone outside my walls that I left my own walls unguarded. That is the story. That is the whole story. If it has made you feel something, good. Feeling something means you are still soft enough to be saved. Just make sure that softness is wrapped from now on in wisdom. Because the world is full of people who will stand in your rain and wait for you to open your gate. And not all of them are there because they need shelter. Some of them are there because they have already decided what they want to take from inside your house. The work of your life is learning to tell the difference before you reach for the latch. Stay safe, love fiercely, but never love yourself last.